Hello grandpas and nerds around the world. Welcome to my battle camp, the perfect place for any strategy enthusiasts to search for validation in their hobbies. This time, we'll talk about some of the best RTS games of all time that are worth playing in 2024. If you're a true strategy fan, you might have already played all of these, but who knows? Maybe there are one or two games that you missed. Are you ready? Let's go, Commander.
Affirmative. Heavy artillery strike fire. Molotov out. Coordinates. Full power to shield. Receiving your transmission. Roger that. Sector is set.
Rise of Nations is a historical strategy RTS game that has various elements to master. Rather than a simple military focus, the game centers on creating a balanced and ever-growing economy, almost making it feel like a race to economic superiority as much as a battle against enemies. This economic depth, coupled with the limits on military upgrades, makes the game feel more strategic. Victory often comes to those who have the stronger economy, not just the biggest army. Battlegrounds is a classic RTS game that blends intense real-time battles with a world inspired by ancient mythology. In this game, you start with humble peasants who train into warriors along unique paths. Samurai, cannoneers, berserkers, and more. This system making each unit feel like part of a crafted story rather than just a cog in the machine. And the battlefield itself feels alive. Animals react to your moves, high ground makes ranged attacks stronger, and weather impacts your strategies.
Empty the mine and seek the target!
Company of Heroes 2 is a World War II strategy game set on the brutal Eastern Front that is more about survival and strategy than glory. The main campaign story tries to tackle the horror of war, following a Soviet soldier who becomes a journalist documenting the sacrifices and brutal decisions on the Eastern Front. However, where it really gets fun is outside of the main campaign. Theater of War missions offer standalone challenges and co-op scenarios that are less overwhelming and let you experiment with different strategies. These smaller, focused missions feel like a breath of fresh air compared to the campaign. Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion is a 4X strategy game that gets you hooked without much fanfare, especially if you're into grand, space-based strategy games. For newcomers, there's a lot to handle from the start, like developing your empire, building up defenses, and ensuring your culture spreads across the stars. And if you're a seasoned strategist, there's still plenty to chew on, like managing individual ship abilities, setting up fortifications, and dabbling in the game's diplomacy mechanics.
Is it time?
The Lord of the Rings: The Battle for Middle-earth 2 is an RTS game that takes everything that made the original fun and cranks it up a notch. The biggest change from the first game is the shift in the campaign format. Instead of the living world map style from the original, this one adopts a more traditional structure that works much better. The free-form base building mechanic is also a huge improvement, allowing players to place buildings and walls anywhere they want. Starcraft Brood War is an expansion that takes the already excellent foundation of Starcraft and elevates it to new heights. One of the biggest improvements is the rebalancing of the game. The addition of new units, as well as tweaks to existing ones, makes the gameplay feel fresher and more dynamic. Defensive structures have also been buffed to help fend off early rush tactics, making the game more balanced and thoughtful. The result is a game that requires players to think carefully about their unit composition and strategy.
Obvious that our security protocols have been breached.
Supreme Commander: Forged Alliance is an RTS game that builds on its foundations while introducing new elements that make it even more engaging. In terms of gameplay, this game makes significant strides in improving unit pathfinding and the overall pace of the game. Naval units in particular now move more smoothly across the map, reducing the need for micromanagement and allowing players to focus on strategy. Experimental units also come with shorter build times, which was a welcome change from the original's often painfully slow unit production.
I can still make things right.
Age of Empires II Definitive Edition is a remaster of one of the greatest real-time strategy games ever made, improving upon the classic while retaining the core that made it so beloved. The most obvious improvements are visual. It now boasts stunning 4K graphics, updated artwork, and reworked audio. The older pixelated visuals have been completely revamped, which gives the game a more polished and modern feel. The game's quality of life improvements are also another major plus. Micromanaging your empire is now easier thanks to features like auto-farming, which allows your villagers to automatically reseed farms.
Magnificent.
Command & Conquer: Red Alert 3 is an over-the-top RTS that leans heavily into its quirky, alternate history setting with both humor and chaos. The campaign features a series of missions that are designed to unlock progressively, with players gradually gaining access to new units and abilities. This creates a puzzle aspect, where you're often not thinking for yourself but executing exactly what the level designer intended. Still, the missions are varied and fun, with enough narrative twists and gameplay hooks to keep you engaged.
I'm on it, sir.
Our ally is under attack.
The Americans have landed and...
Men of War Assault Squad 2 is an RTS game that doesn't shy away from its complexity and brutal difficulty. One of the most unique aspects of this game is the direct control mode, which allows you to take over a single unit, moving it in third person and aiming its weapons directly. This surprising feature can turn the game into a mini third-person shooter at any moment, and the first time you accidentally trigger it, it's a thrilling experience. Star Wars Empire at War is a strategy game that combines space and ground combat with a deep and engaging galactic campaign. The game is divided into two layers of action: the strategic layer, where you manage your forces across a galactic map, and the tactical layer, where you fight battles in space and on land. The strategic layer takes place on a 2D map of the galaxy, with various planets that can be controlled and developed.
Power to shields. Receiving your transmission. Roger that. Sector is set.
Age of Empires IV is a base-building RTS game that takes us into the High and Late Middle Ages, where we can command the powerful English or the chivalrous French or any of the other factions. And for anyone familiar with RTS games, jumping into Age 4's gameplay feels natural. Whether you're looking to crush enemy armies or focus on your economy, the standard mechanics are here. The strategic map design also stands out. Skirmish maps are semi-randomized, letting you choose a biome, each offering different tactical challenges. Total War Warhammer III is a turn-based strategy game where you're tasked with conquering the souls of 4 demon princes. Meanwhile, you'll also deal with the chaos of the realms and race against other factions to free or destroy the bear god Ursun. In this game, the campaign mechanics are the real star of the show. The game introduces a new kind of challenge with its Chaos Realms, each governed by a different dark deity. These realms offer unique Horde-style battle maps and mechanics, making each one feel fresh and engaging. Aliens Dark Descent is a tactical game that takes the survival horror genre and blends it with real-time strategy elements. At its core, it captures the essence of the Aliens franchise, especially the 1986 film. It's not about going in guns blazing and massacring xenomorphs. Instead, the game focuses on paranoia, limited resources, and the creeping tension of knowing that danger could be just around the corner. The game's systems build on this tension beautifully. Even a simple encounter with a drone becomes terrifying. Wargame Red Dragon is a military RTS game that builds upon airland battle by adding more armies, campaigns, and a new tactical environment, which is naval combat. At its core, the game is all about vulnerability. Every unit is designed to counter another, and vision is crucial. The first side to spot the enemy can take advantage of favorable matchups, which could turn a battle in their favor. This creates a distinct gameplay dynamic where you need to anticipate and infer enemy movements, rather than simply reacting to them. Total Annihilation is a classic RTS game that revolves around two key resources, metal and energy. While energy is required to power and operate your units, metal is used for building them. In the early stages of a mission, metal can be scarce, which means you'll need to manage your resources carefully. The game also does a fantastic job of introducing a variety of units, each with distinct strengths and weaknesses. While building a massive army sounds great in theory, it's not always practical unless you can balance their efficiencies. World in Conflict is an RTS game that balances fast-paced, thrilling combat with the deep strategy of managing unit positions, special abilities, and team coordination. What sets this game apart from other RTS games is its focus on tactical play rather than base building and resource management. Gone are the complicated economies and the need to micromanage resources. This game is all about the battlefield. There are no endless hours spent gathering resources. Instead, you focus on calling in the right units, positioning them effectively, and making use of special abilities. Stronghold Crusader HD is a medieval RTS that brings back everything fans loved about the original, while offering new content, high-definition graphics, and enhanced gameplay features. The game throws you straight into the heat of the Crusades, where you can play as either Richard the Lionheart or Saladin defending his lands. The game also introduces new units and mechanics. You can now command units with unique abilities, such as the stealthy assassin who can infiltrate enemy ranks, or the nimble horse archer who can harass the enemy from a distance.
Well, I can at least do something about you.
Weapons needed, sire. The granary?
Cossacks III is an RTS game that combines large-scale battles, resource management, and historical warfare into an experience that fans will love. In this game, battles can have up to 32,000 units on the battlefield at once, which is something that sets this game apart from most other RTS games. The game doesn't just focus on land warfare. You can also build massive fleets to dominate the seas, making the game feel like a truly grand-scale war simulation. With 20 playable nations, 120 unit types, and over 220 historical buildings to use, the options are endless for how you want to approach each battle. Command & Conquer III: Kane's Wrath is an expansion that offers new content, including a 13-mission single-player campaign, 6 new sub-factions, and a global conquest mode. In terms of gameplay, this game doesn't stray too far from the core mechanics of Tiberium Wars. You'll start with a construction unit, build a base, harvest Tiberium, and then build up an army to crush your enemies. And as expected, the combat is also still as fun as ever. There's something satisfying about rolling over your enemies with huge tanks and massed armies. Warcraft III is an RTS game that blends traditional strategy with RPG elements and a deep story that immerses you in a rich fantasy world. In terms of gameplay, the game takes a familiar path for RTS players, but with enough innovation to feel fresh. Each race has unique strengths and weaknesses, requiring players to adapt their strategies to counter their opponents. For instance, orcs have powerful but resource-heavy units, while night elves are agile and excel at ranged combat. The balance between the races is also impressive, and there's always room for improvement and experimentation as players discover new strategies.
The shadow will. Speak, fool. Ah, at last. The restless dead await.
The enemy mothership
Homeworld Remastered Collection is a compilation of space strategy games that transports players back to a groundbreaking era in real-time strategy, faithfully preserving and even enhancing the original experience. For those familiar with the original games, returning to Homeworld means revisiting some of the best large-scale space engagements in gaming. Every aspect, from fighter movements to the tracking of turret guns on massive ships, combines to make each skirmish a sight to behold. Total War Rome Remastered is a grand strategy game that takes players back to one of the landmark games in the series by faithfully recreating its battles and campaign with enhanced graphics and UI updates. In addition to those, the game also offers some new features, notably an experimental unit size option that allows for larger battles than even many modern Total War games. This addition helps compensate for the lower graphical fidelity of units, allowing players to command truly enormous armies and recreate epic ancient battles. Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds is an RTS that delivers just enough Star Wars magic to satisfy longtime fans. Right off the bat, if you've played Age of Empires II, you'll notice Galactic Battlegrounds mechanics mirror it almost exactly, from resource gathering to tech progression. And in terms of mechanics, the game introduces a few twists that lean into its sci-fi setting. For example, almost every unit has a ranged attack, which means combat quickly becomes a laser-filled spectacle. WARNO is a military RTS game that blends detailed combat mechanics, refined strategic elements, and a shift toward more approachable gameplay. Set in an alternate Cold War-era scenario where NATO and the Warsaw Pact face off in 1989, it excels in offering an immersive experience for every type of players. And while the game retains the hallmark complexity of the genre, it feels like there's less frantic micromanagement on the battlefield. It's a significant improvement in pacing that gives players more control without overwhelming them. Total War Shogun II is a strategy game that offers a thrilling balance between careful planning and large-scale warfare, set against the backdrop of Japan's Sengoku period. The gameplay is divided into two main phases: a turn-based campaign map where you control territories, manage resources, and engage in diplomacy, and a real-time battle mode where you command your armies. Diplomacy plays a huge role early on, and the AI does a great job of making each faction feel unique and somewhat unpredictable, especially on harder difficulties.
Black sails! Port side!
Age of Mythology Retold is a fantasy strategy game that brings a much-needed visual overhaul and some subtle gameplay changes to the beloved RTS classic. As a reimagining of the 2002 game, Retold successfully modernizes a few elements while preserving the nostalgia that fans love. The way you mix human units with mythological ones makes combat fun and strategic. The reworked Norse, for example, now have more ranged units, giving them a fresh feel while retaining their old-school playstyle. Naval combat also receives a well-deserved spotlight, with the aquatic equivalent of rock, paper, scissors playing out just as tactically as land combat. Starcraft II is an RTS that opens the door to a much broader audience with its stellar single-player campaign, diverse multiplayer options, and engaging co-op functionality. You'll defend against Zerg infestations, raid prison planets, and even control powerful heroes and mission objectives that echo the gameplay style of Dota. Moreover, one of the standout features of the campaign is its customizable army. The game offers a multitude of upgrades, allowing you to tailor your forces and select units that suit your playstyle.
Safety's off. Work to be done.
You wanted to face the Imperial.
Warhammer 40k Dawn of War is a strategy game that brings to life the gritty, war-torn world of Warhammer 40k. And while it doesn't exactly capture the depth of the tabletop game, it does create an immersive experience that holds its own. The gameplay is a mix of tactical RTS action and resource management. Instead of mining gold or minerals like in most RTS games, you'll be capturing strategic points to gain resources. This setup pushes you to stay on the move and keep the action flowing, which helps the game maintain a fast, fun pace.
Forward base at this location to facilitate ready access to space marines. We will need men to ensure the war boss is dead and
Fate drew me north.
Total War Warhammer II is a fantasy strategy game that takes everything that was great about the first game and makes it even better. And as usual, the game features the staple real-time battles and expansive campaign maps. But what really stands out are the diverse factions and the thematic depth they bring to the gameplay. The campaign revolves around controlling the Great Vortex, with factions racing to complete rituals while sabotaging each other. This central objective leads to dynamic, high-stakes gameplay that keeps things tense and interesting right up until the final battle.
Fire beneath me! The walking god!
Ilmanat of finesse!